So we want to welcome you to another day as we go through the Jubilee year here in St. Peter's Square. And we are here together on a journey of hope. We had two holy doors in the last day. First, we started off at St. Paul outside the walls and then spent our day then at St. Mary Major. Bishop, what was it like to see so many people come out for St. Paul outside the walls?
Well, again, it was another one of those magnificent experiences where, again, I know I've been saying this, but it is so true. You really witness the universality of the church. And literally in that courtyard outside, that beautiful Basilica of St. Paul's outside the wall, you saw literally busloads of pilgrims from central Italy that was doing a diocesan pilgrimage. Then you saw people from Central and South America. You saw people from Europe. And they were all converging in this beautiful basilica to celebrate this Jubilee year and to have the opportunity to go through the Holy Door.
Why are we visiting these four basilicas? Kate, can you tell us about the confessios, the altars, and what makes the four basilicas that we're visiting so special?
Well, each of these four papal basilicas has its own charism and its own special confessio, which is a altar underneath the high altar where special relics are contained, where the faithful can come and venerate them and pray. So we've gotten to already visit a few of those, and we're continuing on our journey as we go closer to our fourth one here tomorrow. So at St. John Lateran, they have the relics of John the Baptist. And then yesterday at St. Paul outside the walls, we got to venerate where St. Paul's body is contained. And then last night at St. Mary Major, they have the relics of the manger that Jesus was laid in Bethlehem. And so that was really powerful to sit and pray in front of. And then also here at St. Peter's, we'll get to visit the altar where they have the bones of St. Peter.
Well, and we also were able to meet with one of the Vatican workers who makes the mosaics for the popes that are in St. Paul outside the walls, which of course is the official chronology of the popes. So what did we learn, Bishop, from his work, his handiwork, and how those mosaics are so important to the life of the church?
Well, he expressed to us that he himself has been doing this wonderful work for over 30 years, and that he began at a very young age learning from his father, and that art or that craft of doing mosaic work has been handed on in his family for several generations. So it really reminds us of what, was really part of even the medieval tradition of the craft guilds, and how these people came together, and that these were not just random people who just necessarily thought, well, I'm going to get into mosaic work. They literally were immersed from their very beginnings as a child within a family and being raised in that family tradition of craftsmen. And so he works at the Vatican, and he shared with us that he had the special privilege of being able to be part of the masters that worked both on the mosaic that represents Pope Benedict XVI and also Pope Francis.
Mm-hmm. We have all 266 popes in that transept area, but underneath Pope Francis is that beautiful Paschal candle, which connects us to the columns that we've been seeing all throughout Rome. Perhaps, Kate, can you share with us how that Easter candle stand makes such a difference in the life of the church?
Sure. As we travel around Rome, you've seen in so many of the squares these ancient columns that have the military victories of the generals and the emperors carved into them. Famous ones like Marcus Aurelius and Trajan's column, and they just depict this military victory. Meanwhile, at St. Paul outside the walls, their Paschal candle stand is done in that exact same design, where the victory of Christ over death is actually carved into it, and it's absolutely beautiful. And you can really see, all of salvation history portrayed in this Paschal candle stand, which of course at the Easter Vigil is crowned with the new Easter candle lit from the Easter fire, representing that Christ is the light of the world, and his victory on the cross is truly the victory that has conquered everything.
And then we had Mass in the Chapel of St. Stephen.
Can I interject something there? Because I think it's interesting. Okay. What was very fascinating to me as I looked at that Paschal candle, I have to say, is that, I chose as my Episcopal motto, Christ is the truth. And it's very interesting, as the layers of the Paschal candle go up, Pilate is sitting in his throne of judgment on Christ, representing the passion of Christ, where he condemns Christ to death. But as you move up the Paschal candle, you're able to see above Pilate is the triumphant Christ. And of course, it echoes back the words of Scripture that on the seat of judgment, Pilate says to Jesus, "What is truth?" And of course, what we see is Jesus' response, my motto, Christ is the truth.
So it's that play in the church where they know that Easter candle is standing with Pilate there, but of course above Pilate is Christ triumphant after his death and resurrection.
So one of the things that really has stood out to me on this trip, especially at St. Paul outside the walls yesterday, is that everywhere we've gone, anywhere there's a statue of St. Peter, there's one of St. Paul. And you never find Paul without Peter. And it really brought home for me that the fact that all of us have these unique gifts and talents. I mean, here you have these totally opposite men. St. Peter, this Galilean fisherman, St. Paul, this Roman Pharisee, this scholar. And yet, between the two of them, who should never have been friends or united, were united in the love of Christ. And between the two of them, they transformed the entire world. Peter uniting it in the apostolic tradition, and St. Paul taking it out to the world, but always in connection with Peter.
Then we had the privilege last night of going to St. Mary Major, or Santa Maria Maggiore, and we had a private tour. But in this private tour, we were allowed to knock on the doors of the beautiful basilica. And in that moment, we prayed for all of our mothers, both living and deceased, those on this pilgrimage, but also all of you at home who are mothers. We prayed for you because that really is the place in which Jesus' manger is, where Mary and her role in our salvation comes to life. And we were able to venerate the relics of the manger, but also to spend time in connection with our Blessed Mother. So what was your experience, Bishop, of having the whole basilica to ourselves and being able to experience Mary's presence in our lives?
Sure. Well, it was, again, just a spectacular and very, I would say, calming and serene feeling coming over us. Nightfall had descended, and we went into the cathedral, and there was a hushed lighting, but around the altar, it was fully lit. And I thought the symbolism of Christ the light and this altar dedicated to the Blessed Mother, under which the manger of Christ rests, and the opportunity to go down the stairs and to spend time in prayer in front of that manger. I think, of course, of the Christmas story of the shepherds, and of course they come to adore. And I couldn't help but think, as they came to adore and I was kneeling there, there you are in the presence of the manger, that both the shepherds and then, of course, the kings also come and adore. And both are then called to go out. And the shepherds go out after they adore. They don't just stay there. And I thought about that from the point of view of evangelization. The church's mother, Mary, is our mother. She gives us her son. She calls us to herself. But like she did with her son, she gives him and us back to the world. And to me, that's what I was really thinking about. That gift of the incarnation is not something she clung to, but she gave as that perfect gift, as the Father gave the Son. Christ's mother also gives him to all of us.
Then we were able to see both the side chapels, including one of the Sistine chapels of Rome, not just the one behind us, but the one at St. Mary Major, and to see the tabernacle of Bernini with the true relic of the manger underneath was quite powerful.
Very powerful. And again, I just kept thinking that connectivity of the wood of the manger to the wood of the cross, which then, of course, is exemplified in the Eucharist, and there, the reserved Eucharist.
Mm-hmm. That was a beautiful experience. And of course, we also saw Santa Maria dei Popoli, which is the image that Pope Francis visits whenever he leaves the Vatican or whenever he comes back. And even last week, when he was coming back from the hospital, he stopped at St. Mary Major to visit his mother. And we know that he's going to be buried in one of those side altars right at that image. What does that image have to do with the city of Rome and its importance in connecting us with Mary, our mother?
Well, as you know, even the geographical positioning of the basilica, as was explained to us, is very well designed, that you have, in one sense, the Great Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which shows us of Christ's passion, Mary Major, the incarnation, and then you head towards John Lateran, which of course is the resurrection, and how all of that ties together. And Mary is in the center, receiving her son at the Passion, but then also seeing him in the glory of the resurrection. But I loved in that chapel, when we got there, the icon of the Blessed Mother was closed. And they told the traditions that the basilica, like many basilicas and cathedrals in Europe, have a group of clerics called the canons. And their primary role is to pray the Liturgy of the Hours throughout the day in those beautiful historic churches, pray for the intentions of all the people. And at their evening prayer, or their last formal prayer of the day, they gather in that chapel, and they mention how the final hymn is always a song to put Mary to sleep for the night. And after they sing that song, they cover the icon until the morning when it is reopened. And I sort of thought that really ties into just the rhythm of our days and nights, and really the incarnation again, how we go to rest to be refreshed, and they are there accompanying that image of Mary and put her to rest to remind how she's united to us.
And Mary and Jesus had to do the same thing. They had to go to sleep at night as well.
Go to sleep at night.
But we got to go up to the loggia and see where the Pope would see Rome from St. Mary Major. Mm-hmm. And it was a reminder of why St. Mary Major was built there, that there was a surprise snowstorm in August in the 4th century.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the gentleman was explaining and even showed us, when you're up on the rooftop there, how the basilica is laid out and where the parts of the basilica are, where the nave would be. And he showed us that on August 5th, which commemorates the anniversary of that snow, there's a little gateway that they can get up that literally is above the baldacchino. And they drop rose petals down every year on that date to celebrate and to commemorate that snow in Rome.
Mm-hmm. And then we went even further up to the bell tower and to all the different sides, and we're able to see the city of Rome. Even though it's hustle and bustle most of the time, from up there it was quite peaceful. What was your thoughts, Kate, on being able to see the city from the viewpoint that we had?
It was an incredible privilege, and kind of that otherworldly moment where we stepped outside of the freneticness of a pilgrimage and all of the anxiety of it and the difficulties with all the walking and everything, to step back and kind of take a bird's eye view and remind ourselves of why we're doing this, and that step slightly closer to heaven, feeling that you're in the Lord's presence, because it was so very peaceful and just wonderful for us to be in community together there doing that.
And we also got to see those vestments, in the papal apartments there of Paul V.
Yes, we were having a little refreshment there,
Yes.
and I said you could go to the right and enjoy some food, or you could go to the left and see these magnificent historical vestments. So I said to someone, I said, I'll take the left because we can get the right somewhere else. But those vestments were spectacular, and someone was explaining to me that not only were there gold threads in there, but those gold threads were pure gold that were attached to silk. And when they did a study of those vestments and put them under the spectrometer, they realized they were all gold. But what I found fascinating is they cannot duplicate that process. They've lost that art. And one of the curators was explaining to me that the reason why the gold was put into the vestments, we might think, oh, isn't that over the top by our culture or something, or, oh, it's so extravagant. But actually the gold was threaded into those vestments because we have to realize in the time those vestments were made, you didn't have electric lighting and all of that. And many times with the candlelight or the different times of the day and night, as the liturgy was being celebrated, literally those vestments would reflect a different depth, a different dimension, and the people who are in the worshiping act see the uniqueness of that, and it pulls them into, in a deeper visual way, the mystery of the liturgy. And I just thought, we, especially as Americans, sometimes are so pragmatic. We forget sometimes all of the many different dimensions that give us the richness and the fullness of the liturgical actions of the church and the Mass itself. And, in a modern age, it might be real quick to pass by that, but we really see how that was part of the whole liturgical experience.
Well, everything was gift for God, and that was Mary's life. And you actually got to see also a beautiful nativity set last night as well.
Yes, I believe that was from the 14th century, and it was beautiful. It was a stone-carved nativity that depicted the Blessed Mother holding the infant child on her knee, which I thought was very interesting. And again, orientating it out to the world, not to herself. Joseph behind, very humbly, and as the guardian protector. And I loved the ox and the donkey. They were sort of juxtaposed more in a head position, and then the king's adoring. Really interesting.
So we had quite a full day yesterday. Yeah. But in all of the places we were, we prayed for you. And we invite you to continue to send your prayer intentions to us at petitions@dioceseofgreensburg.org. We also invite you to share your questions with us. If you have questions about the sites we visited, the pilgrimage in general, or even just questions about your faith, email us at petitions@dioceseofgreensburg.org. But here we are in the magnificent view of St. Peter's, and we'll be journeying through the holy doors here soon. And we're going to be bringing you with us as we together go on a journey of hope.